Today's video, we are on the MIT campus, arguably the #1 ranked university in the entire world. Now, for those of you that are new to the series, in this series, we tackle 3 aspects. In each episode, we break down the admission requirements for undergrad as well as graduate students, look at what type of scholarship each university has to offer, and lastly, how can you maximize your chances of getting into your dream university. Now, for those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Saloni. I've done my research at Harvard Medical School, graduated with my master's from Cornell University, and over the last few years, I've helped countless students get into their dream college. Now, one part that I absolutely love in our Road to Success series is that I like to explore and find cool facts about different universities in these videos. So did you know that MIT is the home to where the www word was coined? World Wide Web, we all use it. I mean, technically we don't type it anymore, but I thought it was cool. Other things, the Human Genome Project was researched here. It was a group of researchers, of course, with Harvard and other universities, but a lot of the lab work was done at MIT. And even Bose was founded by an MIT alumni. So these are just some cool facts about famous things famous people at MIT have done. MIT was founded on April 10th in 1861, and they've always had a huge focus on application-based learning, which is why their motto reads Mens et Manus, which means minds and hands. Now, they've kind of always been nerdy as such, and the fun way that they've done to show this around is release their undergraduate decisions on Pi Day, which is March 14th, precisely at 6:28 p.m. Now, although MIT isn't technically an Ivy League, I feel like it's no less because it has 98 Nobel Prize winners as part of their alumni, staff, student, and we're standing in the main hall of the MIT campus, which has great facilities overall. All right, so we're going to start looking at undergrad admission stats, and these numbers are pretty crazy. Now, just for reference, last year, 28,000 students applied to MIT, which isn't really a great amount because just as like a reference point, over 100,000 students actually applied to NYU last year. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, I guess people want to make sure they're completely ready before applying for a university like MIT, whose acceptance rate is at 3.9%. Just about 1,200 students actually got admitted, which is an extremely low number. Now, they do admit a good number of international students, but it's very competitive, and you definitely need to be a bright student to stand out. So MIT has its own application portal, which you will apply to, which is a little different than the rest of the universities. It's not on Common App, so you need to make sure you're applying through their own portal. It has a $75 application fee, and the type of student that they're looking for is definitely academically rigorous, which means that you need to be performing well in your high school and also be a good test taker. So they do require the SAT or the ACT exam. And just as a reference point, last year, the minimum SAT score that students that got into MIT had was 1520 and above. In fact, 75% of the students had a 1570 or above, which is super competitive. So now coming to the deadlines. Now, MIT has a very strict rule that you can only apply once every year. And what this usually means is they have 2 types of deadlines, an early action deadline and a regular decision deadline. Most students, if they don't get into early action, which is like a November deadline, then apply for the regular decision, which is a January deadline. You cannot do this for MIT. You have to pick either one or the other. Now, with that, I do want to point out that early action applicants have a slightly bit of like an advantage because their acceptance rate is 5.9%, which is definitely better than the 3.9% that regular decision applicants have to face. All right, so let's talk about the requirements that you need as a high school student if you are trying to apply for an undergraduate degree at MIT. The first thing is, in the MIT application portal, you'll typically fill out your basic information, your background, name, country of citizenship, all of that stuff. Next, we move on to the educational requirements. You will need your class 9 all the way till 11 final exam mark sheets. Now, this just needs to be the final exam, nothing more than that. Now, for those of you that are currently in class 12, you'll need 2 documents. One is a mid-year report, which is any recent even unit test that you've taken, that works perfectly fine. and then you need your predicted class 12 marks. Obviously, since you're in class 12, you don't have your final marks, and you don't need that in order to apply to MIT. The next thing comes the essays. Now, this is, in my personal opinion, the hardest part, because ideally you should be spending a couple months on the essays. You have a personal essay, and then you have 5 supplemental essays, which are all required. These supplemental essays need to be specific enough to MIT, and it should be in a very subtle way telling MIT that you haven't reused these essays from like other universities that you're applying for. The next thing, we move on to the activities. Now, you have to fill out the activities to showcase your societal impact, community impact, maybe a few passion projects that are academically and non-academically related, but don't try to just be like a founder of every club when trying to list these out. Moving on, we have letters of recommendation. Now, MIT requires 2 letters of recommendation. One has to be from a math or science teacher, and the second one can be from like a language, social science teacher, so you can pick what the second one would be. Personally, before you actually ask your teachers, it's a good idea to start maintaining a good relationship with them, maybe for a few months or even like a year before. That way, when you're asking them, they know who you are, they can genuinely write something impactful for your application. Lastly, we come to standardized testing. Now, MIT is not optional in any way, which means that they do require you to submit some sort of a standardized test. So you have the SAT or the ACT. I feel like one of the reasons a lot of students don't apply is because this test is mandatory. And like I said earlier, you have to score well in these exams if you want to maximize your chances of getting in. Now, if you are an international student, one other test that you'll probably need to write is an English proficiency exam. So something like TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo will do the trick here. Now, all of this can get very overwhelming, and it isn't something you should be doing 1 or 2 days before the deadline, especially if you are seriously thinking of getting into a prestigious college like MIT. So the Ivy League 101 is a perfect match for someone who needs an organized set of videos that has step-by-step tutorials on not only how to apply to the college itself, but also how to apply for financial aid, what you need to do post-applying, and have templates to help you through the entire process. Now, the Ivy League 101 isn't just for one college. You can actually use the entire series of videos from multiple colleges, and it's sort of like an assistant and a time management tool that you can use that can be your study buddy for the entire application process. So the link to get the Ivy League 101 is going to be in the description below. Check that out. If you are an international student who needs financial aid, this is probably going to be like your best bet. The student financial aid services, which seems like they're closed, maybe they ran out of money. But anyway, on a more serious note, if you need to apply for financial aid, you have to indicate yes on your MIT application. And after you do that, you'll be submitting your CSS profile, which is a tax document where they look at your parents' income, your household size, what your income and assets are. And based on that, MIT will judge how much financial aid you need. Now, since MIT is need blind, asking for financial aid does not mean that they will maybe reject you or negatively impact your application. All of this is good, which means that the only thing you need to focus on as a student is to make sure you have a good profile that can get accepted into MIT, and cost-wise, they'll take care of the rest. For the graduate students, which means those of you that are applying for master's or PhD degrees, I'm not leaving you behind. Now, last year, about 35,000 students applied to MIT and 4,000 got in. The acceptance rate varies anywhere between 7 to 12%, which is much higher than undergrad acceptance rate, to be honest. And what was like the best and cool feature that I found was that almost half of the students that applied were international students. Now, moving on to the admission requirements, you'll be applying through MIT's own website portal with a $75 application fee. Now, considering that MIT is a very academically focused program, it's also almost ranked 1 in the world, you have to have an academic GPA of 3.5 or better in the most recent degree that you've done. Now, the higher that you have, the better it's going to be for you to stand out. In addition to that, they also need students to write the GRE test, which is a mandatory standardized testing requirement. Alright guys, that's all that I had for this video. I hope that you guys got some insights about MIT's admission process, both for undergrad as well as grad students. It's definitely competitive, but I feel like if you can be one among those 4,000 students that can get in, It is a huge prestige and a remarkable step in your career. Now, for those of you that are watching till this point, I have a weird question for you. When was the first time you ever heard of MIT? Put that in the comments below. Also, if you have suggestions on what other universities we should tackle for our road to success, put those in the comments below as well. Like the video if you're watching till this point, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.